Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is the CIO panel. I know we've had a long day, but boy, what a packed and star-packed. And I got to tell you, every single one of these panels has been off the charts. And I don't expect less from these guys. These guys are just as brilliant as all the ones who came before. Thank you, people online, for hanging around with us. This is our last panel for the day. And I'm just going to turn it over to Brian and let him take over.
Well, all right. Okay, everybody can hear me. Guys, this is going to be the best session of the whole day. Thank you very much. Just want to let you know that all the stunts you see are done by the original actors. There'll be no commercial breaks. For those of you listening at home enjoying your afternoon beverage of choice, we'll get the full hour of uninterrupted time, hopefully, doing whatever it is you do. Guys, thank you very much. This panel came together very quickly, literally. So hopefully we can answer some of your questions, give you some insight of what we think. Again, I like the other panels before that it's very, very interactive. Raise your hands. A lot of us are in the similar space, so no problems there. We'll go through introductions. I'll start with myself, and then we'll start with our first topic. A little about me. My name is Brian Ruzycki. I'm the CIO CTO for a company called Homeowners Financial Group. We are a mortgage originator, very similar to the one everybody knows, Quicken Loans, right? We are about 550 people. We're operating about 30 different states. I live in Dallas. My corporate office is in Scottsdale, so I get to travel there quite a bit, which is not a bad thing. That's kind of the scoop. I'm also the first CIO CTO the company's ever had. They grew big enough, and they kind of decided, hey, we really need somebody to help manage all these people. So I was very happy to take that opportunity, but it's been an interesting journey along the way.
Great. Woo. I am Heidi Cox. I am the Chief Information Officer at HKS. HKS is a global architecture firm. They're the third largest in the world. Some of the things that we've designed, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, Ranger Stadium, SoFi Stadium, so some pretty small little venues. So we are headquartered out of Dallas. We are global, 26 offices around the world. I've been in IT over 20 years, oddly enough, always in the A&E space, the architecture and engineering industry. So there's always a little bit of nuance that comes along with that industry that, as we talk a little bit today about, what are we talking about? Agile. I always forget these three words, but it's alliteration. So agile, aligned, and automation, right? So how does that apply to the world of architects and architecture?
Hi, I'm Jeanette Wayne, and I work for RG Holdco, which contains Goodyear Cosmetics and Revision Skincare, and I lead the information technology team. So my job is to bring order to chaos.
Well, right on. All right, so let's start with this first topic. We talked a little amongst ourselves, and Heidi is the one that's probably got the best way to communicate it outwards, and I think there's some really good feedback on it. I'm just going to say the letters. It's ESG, relating to talent. And Heidi, go ahead.
Not so much just talent. I was just bringing up, who here knows what ESG stands for? Raise of hands. Environmental, social governance, right? So I brought that up because when we were talking about agility and alignment and automation, think about the last 2 to 3 years, right? And the role of the CIO and how that has changed. Not just the role of CIO, firms in general. I would say prior to the pandemic, our executive team, although they claimed to always be in alignment, they weren't, right? They had their own little projects. They were doing their own thing. We would sometimes cross paths. But when COVID came around, that was the first time that we saw true alignment, right? Everyone jumped on board. We were talking about it every day. Marketing would show up at the table. What do we need to do to talk about this? IT would show up at the table. What do we need to do to address COVID? Everybody, we were all on the same mission. So that's why I think ESG was important, because it started to bring in other areas that we could be aligned, right? And so we're starting to see, and I'm gonna preface that everything I'm talking about is really coming from my experience in the architecture world. So think about it. We design buildings. A lot of that is commercial buildings, hospital buildings, hospitality buildings, and so buildings that took a big hit during the pandemic, right? So we had to get in alignment around how are we designing buildings to deal with mental wellness, to deal with airflow, right? I mean, everything that we're thinking about when you're talking about even just what was going on with the pandemic. And so the society and the environmental aspects were so important to everything that we designed that it started to bring everyone to that business table, and from no matter which area you sat in. So even from technology, it's like, what can technology do to help us, right? So there was everything from IoT sensors inside buildings to you name it. So that's why I wanted to just talk about that, because it was just another source of alignment.
You know, I thought it was, when I was researching it, I have to be honest, I actually had to research it a little bit and talk to our head of HR, and I talked about what would, in a mortgage space, yes, I can get rid of paper and stop being a tree killer, and, you know, that certainly that can help, but I posed a question. I thought there was a statistic I saw that about 7 years, my age group will be about only 23% of the workforce. And so the much younger workforce might come up to me and sit there and literally say, what's the carbon footprint of your data center? Or of your cloud instance. And so I went a couple of days ago and I looked at that and I said, my gosh, could somebody actually really ask me that question? Well, I guess they could, right? So I went and looked, and Microsoft has I use Azure for my cloud solution. Microsoft Azure is something they're coming out with, Microsoft Sustainability. It's a bunch of Power BI reports and et cetera. They're launching something on June 1st, although I didn't get to the details of it. But I hooked up some of the reports and I looked at my Azure instance. So I called my head of infrastructure and I said, listen, we're going to change your team name to coal burners. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't know what to, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't know what to parallel against, but I had metrics that now showed electricity consumption and output based on my usage. So I thought that was pretty neat. So I really thought there, I'm like, my gosh, should I be thinking about this in the future? It's like, okay, well, if you look at your software development teams, most of them call APIs 5,000 times. Well, why don't you be a little bit more efficient? So if they could write their code a little bit more efficiently, well, that would save compute, right? So it would just kind of put that thing together. And the social aspect I was thinking about for my company was about open door policies. How easily do you think a junior member of a team has the ability to go to the CEO? And I think that's very good at my company. How do you do social surveys? We do awards programs. We do charity events. We have our own charity. We encourage people to participate, give them time off to perform charity. So I think that I really like that social aspect. The environmental impact thing, though, it was something that I had to get my head wrapped around a little bit the other day when I looked at it. Any thoughts?
As I was listening to you talk, I was mindful or reminded of a conversation that I had with my father-in-law one day. Now, I came from EDS. He was one of the original 100 at EDS. And he told me that he was kind of chuckling as he was watching systems and software and solutions be developed, because the technology has progressively gotten more robust. It's capable of more. So in the old days, and he used to describe it as when the Earth's crust was cooling, you had to be careful about how you used your data and what you put through storage and what you put through memory, and be very selective about how you moved it, because you had a finite amount of resource. And he said, these days, as the systems have gotten more robust, as more resources are available, we've gotten quite sloppy about how we use code, how we move data, and we are not as prescriptive as we used to be. Because those resources are available, it's really easy. Oh, I don't need to just move those 2 bytes. Let me move the whole 100-character string instead of 2. And so as I was listening to you talk about that, I'm reminded that he kind of poked me that day standing in the kitchen. I was really glad he didn't have a knife, because he was flourishing his hands. I'm like, let me move back just a little bit. But he's right. We've gotten a little sloppy about how we use the resources that we have. And as a result, our carbon footprint is bigger.
Very good point.
So climate change, you hear about a lot, right? As we're interviewing people, just to bring it back to the talent point, we do get people who want to join our company because of our environmental work that we're doing. We joined the 2030 challenge. We want to be not just carbon neutral, but carbon positive, right? We do a lot of charity work. right? And so people looked at what projects we're doing, how we're designing, and if we're being good social stewards, right? You hear about McDonald's leaving Russia, right? I mean, people are reaching out to companies based on sometimes what's happening in the political world, what's happening globally, right? And so in this war for talent, you're getting questions, can I work from home? A lot of people will ask that, but then they also ask about what are you doing related to XYZ, right? Whatever the political hot button is out there. And so these are questions that firms have to answer now. When I looked at HKS, I went out on their website, started doing research. I got excited for some of the things that they were doing, right? They had built a maternity ward in Africa, right, as a charity event because the maternal mortality rate was so high over there. And they were doing all of this stuff with very sustainable technology. And I was like, man, I would love to be able to work for a company and tout that as something that we're doing. And so that's where the ESG thing is really important. People have to be proud about where they work and what their company is doing. Going back to the Agile too, as firms, we're having to change how we do things. This whole flex work, hybrid work, yep. Really connecting with the people that you're hiring. And you can now hire from anywhere around the world, right? And so that changes some of our HR policies, it changes our marketing material, it changes our technology and what we're working on. So again, it united and aligned all of these different groups within the firm to handle some of these topics.
When I look at agility, and this is a kind of weird thing. I have the opportunity to be a mentor for UTD Dallas' MBA program. And when I get a chance to stand up in front of the group, and every semester we get a new young student, and they're really excited to talk to her, they get paired up with. And they always tell me, they said, how did you get from point A to point B? I said, well, I failed my way to the top. And most of them sit there and say, oh my God, how could you actually admit that? So well, I didn't learn from my successes. I was like, well, that was easy. So when I think of agility, though, it's when I tell my teams, I tell every person that comes to the company, I tell them, don't be afraid to fail. And I said, if you come in here and somebody tells you you can't do something, they either did it once and failed at it, or they never did it before. So don't be afraid to try, is what I'm trying to say, right? And so that agility, so with my Scrum teams, there's 2 week sprints because I want them to be stressed to find the best solution in 10 days, right? And if it fails, they'll fix it in another 10 days. Now, if it keeps failing, it's another story. But the agility about making sure your team feels that it's okay to move faster.
Safe.
Right. And you're not going to put them in a position where it's uncomfortable if they do fail. So,
the Thomas Edison story, right? I didn't learn one way to build a light bulb. I learned 99 ways not to build one.
Yeah. Well, that's important stuff.
So are you guys doing anything with automation?
So I've done it before, not at this company. And, let me tell you, and then I'll kind of hand it off to you because I know you've got this pretty well done recently. Automation for me I used to be so passionate about it when I was younger. That wasn't that long ago, although I'm not that young. Anyway, I used to be so passionate about it that the business unit had to fix their process and say, man, please don't make me automate something that's a really bad idea. I never succeeded in that. So now it's like, well, I need somebody to push that button. Okay, maybe there's another way. Maybe we don't need to push these 5 buttons. Let's push one button. That's a great idea. I don't have time. I need somebody to push the 5 buttons. So what do? We go push the 5 buttons. I've done it at companies where we've had to send out emails to the entire organization from the CEO saying, you're not going to lose your jobs. You'll have more fun stuff to do. So it's a really interesting psychological implementation. And then you can also run to the fallacy that your entire engineering team moves into bot writers, right? And so that's not maybe the best use of their time either, because you can have too many bots running in the system as well. But it is a culture change. And it is a change to get a company to sit there and say, they're fearful of their jobs, right? We say we'll get rid of mundane tasks. But it's probably been about 2 companies since I've done it. So I think you've said you've done it recently.
So we have embarked on RPA, right? Mm-hmm. Robotic process automation. We have only 2 bots, so I'm an expert. But to your point, right? That's a good question. Do you fix the process first and then automate, or do you automate something that's not a great process? And I think both, right? Sometimes there's a really gnarly process that would take years and years to change, but there's this one little part of it that's just manual and tedious and time consuming. Yeah, if I can build a bot to fix that, then it helps. So my goal is always ROI. Is there a return on that investment? Are you creating more technical debt by doing that? Because the first group that wanted to automate is our finance group. We want to automate all this. And I'm like, every time you customize your financial system, it just makes it harder to upgrade, right? And I think we all have been part of companies that's the last system that ever gets upgraded, right? Because they don't want to touch it. So there's always those balance trade-offs. And so every single time somebody comes to me with a process, that's what we look for, right? Is there a return on investment? Is this going to create a technical debt down the road that's going to keep us from upgrading or whatnot? But overall, I'm a big supporter of automation, right? It's why have somebody do something that's very technical or very menial over and over and over again when we can automate that? That's what I love the bots that we have.
For me, it depends on which company you're talking about. And yes, I've had plenty of opportunity. And much like you, depending on the set of circumstances, the process might be the most important thing to look at. And sometimes the automation might be the most important thing to look at. And it depends on where you're going to solve the problem. Where's the biggest pain point right now? And making sure that you're not going to, and I'll use a different set of language, paint myself into a corner. If I do that, I customize or I modify a supplier's code in an ERP system, about 6 months from now, I'm going to pay for that little event. And it's a gift I'm going to continue to keep on paying for, to use your example. So I try not to paint myself into a corner, and I do try to encourage my teams to solve the pain point. So, and most recently, gentleman in the back right there, we automated packing slips, as simple as that is. And it sounds mundane and it sounds trivial until you realize that he took a half a full-time equivalent out of an end-to-end process in about 45 minutes. That's some pretty good ROI for my money. I was a happy camper.
You know, when I talk about automation, I also look at automation like specifically within IT. I'll give you an example. When I joined my company, again, being the first C-level IT person they had, great honor, and I said, okay, tell me what your challenges are. They're like, well, we don't really know. I said, okay. So I did my little investigation work and so forth, and I love the board and my peers. And I get in there and I look to my department, the folks I inherited, all great people, and I said, okay, well, how are we delivering machines? They said, well, we just manually install Windows. I'm like, what, like CDs? Like, what are you guys doing? And so I'm going to say, well, what are you using for imaging? And say, oh, we don't really have any of that. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. And so now remember, the mortgage industry are companies that went exponentially huge. So even in the time I've been there, the company's grown about 30%, 40%, right? And so this particular organization in 2018 was maybe about 250 people. So now we're 550. So it's an exceptional growth, right? But it was automation inside the tent where, I would talk about infrastructure as code, and I didn't have anybody with experience with that. So that wasn't an option. I had to get that skill set in the house. Something you said, though, I wanted to bring up about automation, kind of my last point on it, and I've heard this theme throughout the day, is at the right time, at the right moment. Somebody had said earlier in the CISO session about what is important to your business unit this quarter, right? The mortgage industry, there are 35% loans happening than it was before. So all the mortgage companies that went this are not going like that. They're going back to basically 2019 levels, staff, volume, et cetera. And that's normal. But what wasn't important was automating the sales process, because there would be no point, because there were so many loans and everybody in the world was refinancing. There wasn't a point the problem was in the middle of the house. The problem is that the rates kept going. How fast could you lock that loan before it went lower and somebody else got the loan? So it was at that particular moment, it was getting the operations side, the processing, document recognition, right? Getting all those features set up so we could speed through the process so we wouldn't lose the loan because the rate dropped. So now the rate's not dropping. So we're not worried about that happening, right? We are worried about it going up, but the sales process is now, how can we collect the documents faster? Is there a better tool? Is it, I don't want them putting in their email. So it's a little bit on the sales cycle how to get that process automated because we have the operations side done. So that is now the focus of what tool sets, what processes can we put in place over there. So to make it easier so the salespeople is
So the pain
great.
point shifted because the business shifted.
Exactly.
So how do you stay agile?
We by paying attention to what departments are experiencing the pain, we can kind of sit there and so our executive staff meets once a week, and about once a month we go through our project list, and this project list is a mile long, right? And so recently we decided that we should probably only do like 2 or 3 at a time because doing 10 doesn't work because it's the same 10. So we just agreed to that, which is great. But it's really kind of like, what is the most important thing? And then we kind of swarm that a little bit, which isn't like, it's like all the kids in a field going to the same soccer ball. But you know what? Us staying in our own spots isn't working either. So it's whatever we go to, what business needs to make it so that we can close the loan as efficiently and as fast as possible, then that's what we do. That's the number one thing that matters. So
that's where we struggled many years ago. I say many, probably about 3 or 4. When we were very cross matrix, so you have regions, you have practices, you have offices, and they were all kind of doing their own thing. And then you had the enterprise groups. Right before the pandemic, we had gone through a complete strategic realignment, right? And they really made our organization look more like a dartboard, where the CEO in the middle, and then you have the enterprise groups, and it kind of goes out. So, but they wanted to be enterprise-led, which is interesting, but you have to incorporate, and then the practice driven, right? And so we were all trying to wrap our arms around that whole concept when COVID hit. But it helped us be enterprise-led, right? And it created these boards, these executive boards, where we would all get together and we would have your OKRs, right? Your objectives, key results. And so I think it was a couple of years ago, our objectives were for the year, right? So we all work on it. This is what we want to get done this year. Hopefully it's 2 or 3. And then we realized that's actually kind of too long for some of this, right? We really need to break those down into smaller little bite-sized pieces because you can't be agile when you're just planning once a year. So that helped us quite a bit. And so we meet as a group and we talk about, the social, the environmental, the governance, all of those things, as well as, what is it we need to do in the practice to keep moving? Because everything changes and it's changing so fast, right?
That's interesting. I had not thought about revisiting my plan every single quarter, at least not the way you described it. And quite candidly, I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I am shifting the priorities. I keep my eye on a visionary point. Mm-hmm. Here are the things that I want to be true about the environment, and here's what I want our customers to experience. Here's what I want to happen with the business, my point in space, if you will, that I'm heading to. But I am shifting them, and I'm shifting them every quarter. In fact, sometimes I'm shifting them every month, depending on what failed.
When you say you're shifting them, is that just in your team or with the enterprise?
We're shifting among the enterprise.
Okay.
So for our team, and I only took this over about 4 months ago, so we're kind of evolving as we go. And as I came in, the IT team would decide what was important and they would go off and do their thing. Yeah. And there was not that intersection with finance about what was going to be important to the controller and with the chief commercial officer or the leaders of the sales organization, what's going to be important to them, and with marketing and what do they need. So that triangulation wasn't really happening. And when I joined and I said, all right, this is what my vision looks like, everybody looked at me like I had an antenna on my head. And then I came back to them and I said, all right, now I said, here are the objectives that I think we need to hit. Here's how we're going to get there. And then I didn't just have antenna, I had stripes and polka dots and all kinds of stuff. So, that intersection wasn't happening, where we weren't talking about what was important to the organization. And that's shifting. So now the next shift is how do we talk meaningfully about what the business requirements are and what we're really trying to do together, so that we don't create rework cycles for ourselves, where I think I understood what you said. There's a cartoon that I've seen about building a roller coaster. And here's the vision that one guy has of the roller coaster ends up being this like agility course with a tree at the end of it in the last frame. And it's like, yeah, these two guys were not in the same place. So now what I worry about is trying to avoid the rework cycle so that we're communicating about the requirements, we're driving that clarity, that oneness, without surprising one another. So that's our next hurdle, if you will, to trying to turn really tight cycles without creating a paperwork nightmare.
It's something that's interesting in my group. So I came from a much larger mortgage organization. Our head of sales, he's a great dude. He came from a huge organization, and he's used to big machines, and so am I. It's a much smaller staff I have here in the past, which isn't a problem. But he comes in and he goes, I want my sales force to be able to operate this way, right? So that's great. That's all he needs to say. So I look at the environment, I'm like, oh, there's no way it's going to work that way. And for example, he wants a sales force to work out of a backpack. Well, there's no SD-WAN solution like for these people when I showed up in this company. We just turned on MFA. So, there was a lot of things that were like, oh my God, but I love the company, it's great. But the neat thing is that these other C-level executives were able to say, like, what's your mission for how your staff to operate? And they would say this, this, and this. And so 9 times out of 10, they were the same. So I would adjust my roadmap to that. But my roadmap changes quarterly. And so I put a quarterly roadmap, and then I put like a second quarter. And after that, it's like, it really doesn't, the chances of me getting to that stuff are probably not going to happen. Either the first quarter is going to take too long, or things are going to switch out. As an example, I'm trying to move the company to OneDrive, and that's probably, still going, it's been a long time.
Do you guys, thank you. Do you guys ever think about, right now you're talking about tactical, well, in my opinion, a little bit of strategy and tactical measures that you're doing on a daily basis. Do you ever think about your relevance or what the actual shift in the market is from a strategy perspective, and maybe what internally you can do to maintain relevance? I think that has a lot to do with automation and with being agile.
No, next question.
This is a terrible thing to say. And security
You're
is
too busy blocking and tackling.
I do
I
want
know.
to answer when you're done, though.
No, it's a terrible thing to say that the last few years of security concerns and issues, and if any of you guys are trying to get cyber insurance, renewing cyber insurance is like astronomical, right? Instead of $5 million policy, it's $1 million policy for 5 times the price of a $5 million, whatever the policies are, right? Just as an example. So it's astronomical. So it's unfortunate, the reason, but I see IT at the presence of almost every conversation because of security concerns. Right now, it's not the only thing we do, but we're always forefront, in my opinion. So
coming from architecture, AI is a concern a little bit, right? So if you think about, we're building hotels, or I'll say hospitals, that's 50% of what we do is healthcare. What makes you think you can't just load in a bunch of designs into an algorithm and start to, be able to use AI to create a design for a hospital, right? So it's a real big concern in our industry. And so what do we do, right? Do we jump on that bandwagon and start building it in a way that it could start to be leveraged, right? So that maybe you start with a hospital design and then you go and tweak, right? But as a firm, we're trying to figure out how we can be more influential in those designs, right? And it goes back to, you got 3 letters, what is it? ESG. But it's true. It's like, okay, we're building a hospital. It's not just, okay, how many rooms do you want? How many ERs? Here you go, wham, bam. It's, let's figure out how to make that building performant, right? How it can be carbon neutral, how it can aid in the wellness of the patients, how it can aid in the wellness of the people who work there, right? We've hired nurses on staff that can sit there and work with our designers to say, this is the average day in the life of a nurse. They go from here to here to
That
here
is
to
cool.
here.
So it's following
That
the
is
process. So how does the business
Yes.
actually operate? How does a patient move through the facility?
That's only
and
part
how
of
do
it,
you
yeah.
build a workflow so that you can build the architecture? Am I following you?
A little bit, yes.
Kind of like making a hamburger at McDonald's.
But no, it's more
bit.
well-rounded than that, right? It's the process within. It's making all the employees more efficient, right? Which helps at the end of the day. It's wellness. It's mental and physical wellness. So it's bringing biophilic designs into the hospital. Biophilic is bringing the outside inside, right? So more exposure to the light, the type of materials that you use, whether it's wood, stone, things like that, because people feel better when they're more connected to nature, right? So it's wellness. It's the people who work there. It's the community around there, right? How are we building a built environment that also caters to the community around it, right? Earth is one of our clients, and that's what I love about this company. It's like everything we build needs to have the earth in mind as well.
Yeah, but are your customers embracing that?
They are, because, well, there's also, there's a monetary component to it too. If I say we're going to build this hospital and it faces north, but if I tweaked it and faced it this way, guess what? Your energy costs go way down, right? There's everything that we can do for energy designs inside buildings, right? It's how we build it, and sometimes these algorithms can't do that. Right, so when you ask about, I was being facetious, no, move on, but that's something that we have to think about all the time. And so how does technology, this is data, right? So it's all of this, and we take a lot, I say we do it, we're getting better at doing after it's built, to go in post-occupancy after somebody's in there and pull the data. Did we achieve all of the goals that we thought when we designed it this specific way, right? And then we take that and we can put it into the next design. And people come to us for that. They come for all of the certifications we get around wellness. They come to us for the performance that we get within the buildings, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. I love where I work. And because they do all this great stuff, right? You're going to know what ESG is before.
I feel like I'm an expert already. I'll tell you, I talked to HR about it. She's like,
Not HR, talk to me.
oh, you're right on.
So, guys, talk to us about talent.
Yeah, it's very hard to find talent. And so let me tell you my hiring practices, though. This is what I do. I'm curious what everybody else is, or curious how you guys do it. It's so important when you hire somebody that they have to have a personality. And they don't have to be the best person in the world. I don't necessarily like the person that I want to take somebody out for a beer. Some people like to use that analogy. I just want somebody that when they come into a room, the reason I like the Scrum process is because I think two heads are better than one. And I like the honesty of a team. So anybody could say, hey, that was me. I'm sorry, guys, I didn't do it. Or everybody could say, look how well John or Susie did, right? That was a great job. Thanks for saving us, right? It's really that team effort. And I look for people that have that. And so they're a little bit more alert. They'll pay attention to the screen. They won't look around here. But your personality is 50% of your grade when you come for an interview. And so the other 50% is your skill set. Now, you may be, man, the best XML parser or network guru. Well, if I don't need any of those, then I'm not going to hire you, right? So maybe it's just not a good fit. But you're best to the skill set, and I tell the recruiters that we'll let them know before they leave the parking lot if we're going to hire them or not. So it's ranking 1 to 10. If everybody silently writes it down, we flip over to the same time. If it's 8 across the board, then we hire them. The challenge is trying to anticipate what I'm going to need in the future, right? And so now if I hire somebody who's an expert in, I don't know, product X, but I know that's going to be 6 months down the road and I want to use that, but I haven't approved it, well, now I'm doing this person a disservice by bringing them into the company, right? Then the question is, my team is so small that I can't really afford to hire junior level people because I don't have a training program to do it. There's no peer to attach them to. So I'm stuck hiring senior people and having higher resources. I also offshore as well. So those are some of the challenges I've got, trying to anticipate what I'm going to need in the future, even if a language is going to stick around in the future. That's a whole different issue. And then trying to find the talent not through a recruiter, I have not found that possible. Although some people are very successful in LinkedIn, I'm not finding people. But
What we're seeing, trying to hire, are the questions that are folks are asking, right? It's not always salary. It's not always the skill set. It's a lot of, can I work from home? All of these other skills, right? I've been in my role for about 5 years. Number one priority was building the team, right? Building a team and a culture that I love, and I'm very, very protective about that culture now. But I can tell you, I've had 0 turnover on my team, 0, right? And that's because of the culture that we've built. So when we hire people, we hire them to be part of our community, right? And so, again, it's personality and it's skill set, but it's embracing who they are as a person, making sure that they can show up and be their genuine, authentic selves all the time. And it's very respectful and authentic, right? And so I think when you have that as a culture, it makes hiring a lot easier. I had 3 or 4 open recs that people referred folks to our company, right? I didn't even have to go through recruiters. I met them through engagements like this as well. They wanted to come work for the company. So it's all about the culture to me, right? And it's all about meeting people where they are, and the needs that people have looking for a new company have changed, right? The Great Recession is because people value different things now than they did prior to the recession, right? And so you have to understand that. Yeah. Yes.
Wait, we can't hear you. So I have to get up.
Okay.
Given the fact that we're coming out of the Great Resignation or whatever it is.
You think we're coming out of it?
Well, I don't know. Help me.
I think we're still in it.
You know, I mean, what across the panel? What is your preferred way to hire? I mean, and really go after the people, to your point, that align to what you think the company family or core values are.
I
mean,
think
how
you
do do
have to
that?
be very transparent in the interview process. For me, it's trying to disarm people, make it a very casual conversation to get to know who they are, right? So that it's not a formal, okay, you know, and so I'll start the interview with, this isn't going to be a typical interview. Let's just talk, right? It's like, I want you to get to know us. I want to get to know you. Let's just have a conversation, right? And if I pull people in, and I didn't do this on purpose, but these are people that we all know each other really well, and we'll just chit-chat and goof off. And so you start to disarm the person and let them, you pull back the curtain and just show them everything, right? And when you are that open and honest about everything, they start to be open and honest about themselves, right? And that's how we've interviewed and hired the best people. And I'll have second calls and be like, I just want to be really clear. This is what you're walking into, right? These are the challenges. This is how we're going to help you do that. You know, what concerns do you have? And it's been fantastic. But when I got hired, it was a little switch and bait. It's like bait and switch. I think I said that backwards. But they hired me for this. I was like, yeah, I'm going in. And then like 4 days later, everything changed, right? Luckily, it was okay. But I don't ever want to do that to someone that I hire because I think it has to be a mutual decision, right? And so the more easygoing that interview is, the better.
And that really is a part of ESG. I mean, the leadership role from an ESG mindset, that's how I interview. So, I mean, that's going to become more and more prevalent as we go forward, I believe. I know I'm not sitting on the panel.
How is that ESG, though? What do you mean?
Well, because when you talk about the humanistic element
Social aspect.
the social aspect of a human nature. So, in my opinion, that leads. If you start with that, governance also, everything stems from that, right? So I've been doing this since beginning of time, and we're just now getting there as an industry, okay? So, I'm surprised I'm not buried. But the way you do things, nobody wants to leave.
Right. And so how many times do you show up on an interview and you're wearing a suit and tie or your best outfit?
Oh, I don't wear
I'll tell folks.
I don't wear suit and tie.
But for an interview, for me, I'm like, come casual.
Exactly. Wear jeans.
Right? Because you take off that layer, right? And it's like,
Right.
I'm going to be in a hoodie and a ball cap. Come casual, right? We're just going to have a conversation.
Yeah, every time I have coffee with somebody anymore, I say, hey, I'm just letting you know, I'm going to be in my sweatpants and my T-shirt. So don't come dressed up.
Right. But people change when they're not all dressed up, right?
Yeah.
And
They
they're-
do.
Yeah. And so you get the true, authentic person. And that's what I like. That's what I just have a conversation.
Yeah, our corporate clothing is T-shirts with the company's logo on it. It's so, the CEO, he wears jacket and T-shirts. I've seen him in a button-down shirt like twice. I've been there for a year and a half. So that's just how. So
Yeah, but you're finance.
we just joined the call that way. But it is funny to see people with a tie, jacket, tie in interviews, and it's just not. And plus, when we get on the phone and we just, if there's a couple of us interviewing somebody, we just start cracking jokes. We like bust on each other for a couple of minutes just to like make a joke, like, oh, yeah, you're on time. I can't believe it. This is a first. Just with the candidate there, so he or she can hear us like joking around with each other and be like, oh, okay, they're not like stuffed shirts and that kind of thing.
So do
Funny.
we have any questions? Any more questions?
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to tell you a funny story. When I interviewed for the job that I have now, they caught me at the airport on my way to a consulting gig for a cattle ranch. So in my suitcase are ratty-looking Chevrolet T-shirts, some nasty-looking Nike sneakers, and they say, oh, can you be prepared for an interview tomorrow at 0800? And I'm at the first flight. My battleship is sunk. So I said, well, as long as you're perfectly happy to look at my ratty-looking Chevrolet T-shirt, we're good to go. But honest to God, I didn't have a choice because what was I wasn't going to get to my destination until midnight. And the interview was at 0800. There was no shot that I was going to buy a dress shirt. And trust me, on my way to a cattle ranch, I did not have a button-down shirt. In fact, I didn't even have anything I would qualify as a ratty-looking T-shirt.
We have a question.
Great, thank you. So the first one is in terms of culture. 3 years ago, we hired one way. We had the luxury of building culture one way. Today is different, right? So what is the one or two tips or things that you can share that have helped you in the last year to continue to build and retain the culture that you want for your team?
Yeah, that's right.
You know what? Something we do is, and I couldn't believe this. And this has been in the works of the company for a long time. We call each other homies. And when I remember when I was on the first executive call, and they're all calling each other homies. I'm like, you guys call each other that? But that's okay? And they're like, yeah. So everybody calls each other homies. So it's this little cute little word that we get T-shirts to say homies. We like, I love my homies. What's a homie? When we see each other at company love conferences. So it was just a little catchphrase to bind everybody together that made everybody feel like, and the CEO says it all the time, like, we're all homies, we're all part of the same family, and it really, really stuck. That little phrase, that little word, all those things, everybody feels like they're a homie. So it's kind of cool. That's something that helped with culture.
Our culture changed, right? When everyone's on Zoom all day long, but for the better a little bit, right? You saw into people's real lives, right? You see their kids running around, you see their pets on their desk running around. And then we realized that actually made it a lot easier to connect with folks, right? When you're in a stuffy conference room, you're not going to say, hey, cool guitar you have hanging on the wall back behind you, right? So we got to know each other a lot more. People were much more relaxed in their own environments. Sure, they're wearing yoga pants on the bottom, right? So they're just much more comfortable. But after the first couple of years of that, we were like, we don't want to lose that. We don't want to go back to the stuffy way that we used to interact. And so how do we maintain that going forward, right? So I guess my point is, I don't know if it's always the case, but to incorporate people's lives and who they are into your conversations all the time, right? To ask about how they're generally doing. Mental health became a really big talking point, right? Not as a talking point, but just something that we honestly cared about. How are you doing? Right? It's like, I know you're in a small apartment all by yourself. Can I send you something? We actually started to care about each other a lot more. And so I would say that would be a tip. Keep that going if you can, right? Really be invested in your people. And
it has to be genuine.
Yes.
You have to mean it. It cannot be subterfuge. If you can't fake that.
No.
It has to be real. It has to matter to you. that somebody is well, that they're enjoying what they're doing, that if they've really had to hit and get in order to solve a problem, that you say, you know what, Friday, you're not here. Go be with your kids. Go take a break. Go do something fun, something else. And you have to mean it.
So we're at the end, guys.
Really?
So how
Already?
about,
Really?
Yeah. So how about one final statement from each of you? Maybe some advice.
Uh-oh. Maybe you want me to go first. It's our industry is not. It's not going to get any slower, and I think the agility thing is. I've been able to in all my roles in the last, I'd say through pandemic, I stay aligned with my business unit leaders. So I am friends with them. Yes, some of them don't want to be friends with anybody. That's fine, but I make sure that I'm very, very close to them. And understanding who they are, I reach out if they don't, because I want to stay connected with them, because I want to, if there's something I can do for them, as our roles, it's also to solicit business, right? We're also like the sales rep of our department. So we're constantly trying to get work. Otherwise, we become this little team that's in a box, and sometimes could get smaller. So I would just say stay very close to your business unit leaders. I also stay very close to my VARs. Some of my more trusted VARs, I say, guys, I need a solution that does this. I do not have the time to go find it. The larger ones are very good. Like, okay, well, let's meet tomorrow. I'll bring a couple guys or gals, whatever, and we'll figure it out. Love those people, because I do not have the time to go figure that out. When your team doesn't have the time to figure out technology, stay close to your business partners. Use your VARs to help get you from point A to point B if you can.
If you're going to be agile, it's about your relationships and the people around you, right? You have to have that communication. You've got to be connected on all different levels. And so for me, and I love that we had that diversity group right before this. I don't know how many people were in here for that, but where I think diversity really helps and having that open platform is that people can show up being their authentic, genuine selves, and they're going to do their best work. So that's what I love about it, right? And so when you have that and you truly are genuine and you care for people, you build these relationships, you can move on a dime when you have that close of a team, right? Everybody understands where you're going and why you're going, right? There's trust, there's respect, there's vulnerability there. You can move and shift, right? So that's the key to me, is the culture and the relationship.
And you can ask, if you're under a crunch, you can turn to them and say, guys, look, it's all hands on deck, and they will be right there.
Yep.
Absolutely. And to your point, your customers, your internal customers, and your suppliers, they're part of your extended team, because the object of the game is to solve the problem. So you bring to the table whatever member of the team you think is going to be best positioned to help you solve the problem. And that means collective thinking. It means playing ping pong off of one another, that sense of collaboration based on trust that everybody's going to try and do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And, that's the way home. And that's how teams will accelerate and turn tighter and tighter change cycles together.
So let's give a hand to our panel.